order. And then, oh, thank you. It looks like it's recording. That button just came up. Okay, great. So let's go around and do introductions. And if we could start in the physical room in Helena, and then we'll go down the list of people online.
Bruce Newell here.
Melissa, State Library staff.
Marla Stark, State Library.
Evan Hammer, State Library.
And Jenny Stapp, State Librarian.
Ann Kitch, Librarian in Dillon, Montana.
Erin LaFramboise in Browning, Commissioner.
Henning Arlich, MSU Bozeman.
Can Jamie hear us? Let's see. Jamie, if you can hear us, will you throw a message in the chat?
Looks like Ken is unmuted.
Yeah, this is Ken Walla, Missoula. Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted.
I see Elsie and Jamie online as well.
And Starla?
And I think Starla is Elsie.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Hi, Jamie.
Yes.
Sweet.
Hi, Jamie. And Elsie, I hope you can hear us. You're muted. Okay. Well, the first agenda item is the 19 closing price approach.
They need to mute their phone.
And so I'll turn that over to.
I'm gonna mute folks while we're going over the report. We don't get some echo.
Okay, so this is Melissa, and we met with the Finance Committee. I guess that was earlier this week, and we went over the fourth quarter financial report and year-end statements for FY 2019. And the good news is we spent all the money. So that's the goal, and we met it. I do want to note that we did what's called a reversion, which means we left some appropriation unspent, but only to the tune of about $38,000. So out of a several million dollar general fund budget, there was $38,000 left, of which $26,000 was in personal services. So that's a pretty small number. That's a difficult thing to manage in personal services because there are so many unknowns, and so I feel really good about how we were able to manage that budget, our general fund budget, particularly within personal services. I do also want to note that our coal severance tax appropriation was fully spent. We did have the cash flow to support our entire appropriation, and we did spend it, I think, within several pennies. So that's really great news for us as well. One other thing I just want to note quickly is that is related to our LSTA grant. We typically have 2 LSTA grants open at one time, and those LSTA grants run for 2 federal fiscal years, which also crosses 3 state fiscal years. So the budgeting and monitoring process for that is very complicated. So one of the goals that we have is to align one LSTA grant with one state fiscal year in order to simplify the budgeting process and quite frankly make my life a lot easier. So it looks like we're going to be able to get that fully aligned during our current fiscal year, which is FY20. And we will be spending LSTA 19 in this current year. And so that means that we've had to make a couple of changes, and not as far as the projects that we're funding, but as far as which grant year we pull the funding out of in order to make this alignment, that everything is on track, and we feel really good about this change. So that's something that we just wanted to make you all aware of. So at the bottom of this first page here is a list of all the trust projects, just something that we want you all to be updated on, how we are spending the trust dollars that you all have approved. Yeah, so that's all I really want to mention about that. Just let me know if you guys have any specific questions about those projects. So then on the next page, you can see the 2 line graphs. This is really just showing, I think it's really important that you all see sort of a longer term trend in the balance of these 2 accounts. So it gives a point of reference and some more meaning to just, more meaning than just the balance in those accounts. So you can see that the trust back in 2017 was had the large donation, and that it's slowly declining based on the approved projects. And then the second line chart is the balance in the land information account, and you can see that it's sort of cyclical, and at the end of each fiscal year it sort of ends a little bit lower. So we're hoping to see that flatten out going forward, but something that we just want to make sure you're aware of. And then on the next page is the financial report. So typically you all see this on several different pages, but I took it upon myself this time to sort of combine it all into one page because I didn't think it was necessary to drag things out. So you can see across the top are sort of the different divisions within the agency. We have since reorganized a little bit, so that will look different going forward. But you can see that the budget, the first column has the budget for the whole agency, and then going towards the right are the actual expenditures for each program. So on the far right column is the percent expended. You can see that personal services was 96% expended. Like I said earlier, that's really good for something that's that has lots of variables and things that are out beyond our control. Overall, the entire budget was 89% expended. That's mostly because we typically do not fully expend all of our LSTA grant dollars because the appropriation is bigger than the grant.
I have a question about the personnel services at 96% expended. Do you have any idea about other state agencies, how this compares with those?
That's a good question. I will take a look at that, but I'm guessing that it is significantly, maybe not significantly less, but it is less than 96% because in a bigger agency, that's a bigger risk to take on. And so big agencies I know are very aware of their vacancy savings and not going over their personal services. So I can take a look. Those are widely published statistics, so I can
it seems to me it's a potential talking point for when we're speaking to funders. Because my guess is the same as yours, is that we are extraordinarily well managed, and it'd be nice to be able to have some numbers to brag it up with. I think that's a talking point.
I agree. And the other
this is I wanted to express to Melissa thanks for the reverted amount. It just seems very low to me. So I'm appreciative that you came that close. And the personal services number, yeah, I also don't know what it looks like in other agencies, but between position changes and reorganization and benefits packages, you came extremely close to the target, and I'm very impressed. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
This is Jamie, and I want to echo my appreciation to Melissa, too. I was with Ann and Jenny and sitting in on that committee meeting, and the information that she presented was so easy to understand. That the video, the paperwork was just spot on. You could follow the lines, and I just think she's done a terrific job with what she's working on. Thank you.
The other point that I want to make is you guys all remember how we started this biennium, and just so many unknowns and so many ideas and plans and rethinking and second guessing ourselves as we went through this entire process. And I think how we ended the biennium, the hardest biennium we've ever been through, really speaks well to all of the careful thought that the commission and the staff put into how we had to manage our budget in this extraordinary time. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say that I feel like we've come out the other side, and it feels really good to be thinking positively about where we're going.
Well, as long as we're handing around praise, it's not the measure of a manager is how she does when the going gets tough. And I think that you and your staff, your lead staff, did remarkably. And speaking just for one commissioner, I thank you guys for making this all work. I think it's extraordinary, and I agree with you. I think we've come out the other side, and it's time to rock and roll again.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all I have for the FY19 financial statements. Let me know if you have any questions on that.
Hearing no questions, I'd like to call for motion to approve the FY19 closing financial report.
I so move.
And Bruce, second.
At this point, I'd like to call for commission discussion, but also for public comment. Sorry. At this point, I'd like to call for commission discussion and
Sorry.
and also for public comments. Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approving the FY19 closing financial report, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? All right. The FY19 closing financial report has been accepted. The motion passes. And the next item on the agenda is also Melissa. So we'll hear from her about the FY20 opening budget.
Okay, this is where it really gets exciting. So as you all know, we've been working on sort of flattening the org structure and reorganizing the work, how we look at the work that we do at this agency. So to keep in line with that, we have also reorganized how we record the expenditures and for that same work. So on this very first page here that says State Library FY 2020 budget by account, you can see that down the first column are what we're calling our new orgs. So this is how we are going to separate out our buckets of work going forward as far as the accounting goes. And then across the top, we've split it out by personal services, operating costs, and grants. So you can see our total budget for this next year is $6.6 million, and that's including all fund types. So in order to better be able to track and manage our work, we have decided that we want to break down the orgs further into what we're going to call projects. So on the next page, which is maybe a little bit harder to read with the small print, but you can see that within each org we now have projects, and the budget is broken down further by each fund within the project. So this is something that we started from scratch, essentially. It wasn't this same status quo, what did we spend last year? This was an effort by the management team to go through individually and manually rather, and decide what do we want the budget for each of these projects to look like. I'm really impressed with how involved the other managers and Jenny have been in coming up with this budget. It's really refreshing, and I think it's really important that they have such a deep understanding of what's actually going into each project. This is sort of a whole new way of looking at the agency, and I know that it will set us up for success going forward, and also help with the leads in our agency to feel empowered to have say-so in their budget, and really be part of the team.
So just to highlight a few things, because I know this is a completely different format from what you're used to seeing, I wanted to highlight some changes that you should be aware of going forward. First, I want to say that in terms of the overall program budgets, nothing has declined. We are starting from known expenses from this last fiscal year. Some of those expenses might be accounted for in different projects, and that's intentional so that, as I said in our previous meeting, we can better understand what's driving specific project costs and be able to tell you and others the costs of different programs and services. So certain costs might be accounted for in a slightly different project, but no single project was cut in any kind of significant way. The very top line of the budget, the $75,000 in OTO funding, that's the one-time only funding that was approved out of our budget subcommittee in House Bill 2. That total amount is actually $100,000, as you'll recall. And if you just follow that line down to the Heritage Program contract, we're budgeting an additional $25,000 of that one-time only money in that Heritage Program contract. That doesn't make the contract whole after the cuts that we went through this last biennium. We had cut the contract by, it's the number's not there off the top of my head. It was in the neighborhood of $115,000 over the biennium. So we're not whole yet, but this is a step in that direction. And then the $75,000 in the top line reflects funding that we have yet to allocate to any project or projects. One of the top priorities that we've been talking about is funding for the statewide LiDAR plan that you heard about in your last meeting. And as you heard, there's going to be some significant cost increases to store that data. And so that would be one of the top priorities for this particular project. But there are certainly other needs and opportunities as well. You know, this is an opportunity for us to showcase to the legislature the impact of these funds. And when we were going through the legislative session, we were talking to them about these important needs that are on our doorstep and that are going unfunded, including LIDAR. And so we're really targeting those kinds of initiatives to demonstrate to the legislature the importance of these funds. And then just a reminder to all of you that it's $100,000 in one-time only money this fiscal year, and it's $150,000 in one-time only money next fiscal year. A couple of other things I want to point out, dropping down under consulting and learning to the Federation payments. That budgeted amount is $225,000. That's up from $176,000 last fiscal year. And this dollar amount is based on the action that you took at your February commission meeting when we recognized that we had additional coal severance tax money. Just to remind you, we're in the third fiscal year of 4 fiscal years of increasing appropriation in that coal severance tax account. The current appropriation now is 0.9% up from 0.87% last fiscal year. So the appropriated dollar amount is $550,000. So just over $50,000 more this fiscal year than last fiscal year. As Melissa said, we did have enough cash to fully fund the appropriation this last fiscal year. We hope we'll be in the same situation this coming fiscal year, and a significant portion of that increase is going out in Federation grant funds. I've mentioned the increase to the Heritage Program contract. And then the only other, it's a small dollar amount, but a significant percentage increase is in the Montana Memory Project digitization line, which is very nearly the bottom of the report under statewide projects. We have budgeted only $6,000 in recent fiscal years. We've increased that to $12,000. Jennifer Burnell has a goal to make sure that every county in the state is represented in the Montana Memory Project, and we need to put some resources both in terms of her ability to do outreach to different areas as well as to provide some funding for the digitization work to support that effort. So relatively small dollar amount, but we hope to see a significant return on that very modest investment. I think those are the major updates to the budget for this fiscal year.
Again, I'd like to thank Melissa very much for this new way of viewing the financial reports. I appreciate it. I think that it's very user-friendly, and it helps me to make sense of things very quickly. So, and I know that a lot of work went into this, so I appreciate it very much. And I'd like to see if anybody has any questions or comments for Melissa or for anybody before I call for a motion.
I agree with you completely on, I like the organization. It's easy to follow. I understand. I'm finally getting my feet wet enough with the commission that I'm beginning to understand what it's all about. And I would move approval of the of whatever I'm moving.
So Jamie moves to approve the FY20 opening budget. Is there a second?
This is Erin. I second.
Before I call for a vote, is there any further discussion from the commission or any public comments?
This is Bruce.
This is Ken.
Oh, go ahead.
This is Kenning. I just have a question. Jenny, what is the statewide projects operations down at the bottom?
Henning, that's largely Kara's position. She's the statewide projects coordinator. So that's her position, and then her travel and outreach budget.
Okay, thank you.
This is Bruce, and I'd like to just note under statewide projects as well at the bottom of the page, that many of these, while it's great that we're upping the digitization from $6,000 to $12,000, that's not even a drop in the bucket compared to needs. And a lot of other things that we've identified as important things, such as broadband and sort of more assist for all libraries being able to take advantage of some of these statewide cooperative services, don't even make it here. So while $6.6 million seems like a really cool deal, when I look at this, while I admire the form very much, I think this is great. But in terms of the actual quantity of funds available to get the job done that Montanans need, I think we're still falling short. And so I just note that we still have a ways to go in terms of the revenue to do the good work of the state library.
This is Kenning again. Thanks, Bruce. I agree. In that same statewide projects category, what is there's a line for LSTA Montana Memory Project. Does that cover any digitization?
Kenning, no.
So that just covers what? The Content DM hosting?
That's Jennifer's position, the Content DM hosting, the digital archive, her travel and outreach time, and the Digital Public Library of America membership.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wait, it's me again. I have another question. I see Montana Shared Catalog listed there twice in the LSTA funds.
Yes, so the shared catalog is a little bit of a tricky one because it is funded by LSTA money and it is also funded by the proprietary fund. And so in order for tracking purposes and reporting purposes to the federal government, we have to track the federal dollars differently, so I have to put it in a separate project. So in order to really look at the entire budget for shared catalog, we would need to add those several projects up.
I'm talking about there's Montana Shared Catalog is listed twice as LSTA funds.
Right.
There's one.
That's because in the current year we still have 2 LSTA grants open. In the future there will only be 1 per calendar
I see
year,
one.
but we're playing catch up a little bit. So the first couple of months we'll still have LSTA 18 open.
I got it. I missed the 18 and the 19. Thank you.
That's that point of confusion that's hard for everyone that we're working hard to get away from.
Yep.
Thank you all for your comments. There's a motion on the table, so I would call for a vote to approve the FY20 opening budget. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the FY20 opening budget is approved. And we'll move on to the final agenda item, which is other business and announcements. I'd like anybody with business or announcements to speak. I know that Jenny does have one point of discussion that she'd like to open up. So Jenny, could you go first?
Sure. I have a couple of updates I want to share with you. First, a staffing update. I'm very pleased to announce that we've filled the data coordinator position. We've hired Jessica Edwards, who you all know is our outreach and electronic resources librarian. So a little bit of internal shuffling, so we have another position to fill. But I'm glad that she's taking that position. She actually starts in that position next week and will be helping us with the transition out of her current position. And then we're making progress to recruit GIS techs. With Jessica now taking the data coordinator position, she'll be working with me to hire a library tech position. We're in the middle of the recruitment for a lead shared catalog system admin, and once that position is filled, that's an internal recruitment, we'll go ahead and hire to shared catalog to the administrator that we've been talking about. So all of those pieces are starting to move forward.
Jenny,
Yeah.
the echo is pretty bad. Could you mute everyone who isn't muted?
Sure. And then I'm really sad to let you know that we lost Maya Dario a couple of weeks ago to a PhD program. She is studying Himalayan languages, Himalayan Aboriginal languages out of the University of British Columbia. So you know how much we respected her and her incredible GIS work. So we are also, I think, nearing posting that position. So she was a loss to the agency, and we wish her all the best in her future endeavors. So that's the staffing.
Jenny, does that have to be a entry-level replacement, or can it be someone more at her skill level?
That's a professional level position, Ken, not entry. The GIS techs will likely be entry level, but filling that position will be a professional. Most people have come into that position with a master's degree.
Great, thanks.
So the other thing I wanted to talk with the commission about is a study that we are proposing to study how we administer the Montana Natural Heritage Program. You all know that that has, since its inception, been administered through a contract. First with the Nature Conservancy, and since about 2006 through the University of Montana. And we've begun to question why and whether or not that's the best way to administer that program. And so over the course of the next 6 months or so, we want to evaluate that model, whether or not there are some ways to shape and improve that contract with the university, and also consider the implications of directly administering that program from the state library rather than through a contract. And I want to just take a minute to walk you through some of the thinking and some of the questions that we have before us. And I really want to emphasize that this is a study, and we want to be very thoughtful and deliberate before we make any kinds of determinations. First and foremost, we've been working very, very hard to break down the silos within the agency. You're familiar with the reorganization work that we're doing, and the work that we're doing really to better address our patrons' needs by giving our users a more holistic view of all of the different kinds of information resources that we have available to them through the state library. And the Heritage Program remains a significant silo. They manage all of their own data collections, they manage their own applications, and they have their own staff that are responding to user needs. And so we see opportunity, and we think there would be efficiency in integrating them more closely with the state library. We all have small benches in terms of our staff resources, and so there's also opportunity for us to think about how we continue to cross-train and support one another, especially in terms of information management and application development. The other significant driver for considering our options is just a path to more sustainable funding. Since I have been state librarian, every single budget year we have taken proposals to increase funding for the Heritage Program contract. You all know that the Environmental Quality Council sent a letter to the governor encouraging him to include an increased appropriation to the Heritage Program last biennium, and that didn't go anywhere. When I've had conversations with the budget office and the staff, the response has been, it's a program of the university, let the university figure it out. If we were to directly administer the program, there's a couple of financial benefits that we anticipate. And again, we need to do some careful financial analysis. But first and foremost, for those employees that would be permanent employees of the state library, we would see present law adjustments for the personal services costs. We have never received any kind of present law adjustment for the cost of operating the contract. So that would be a benefit in terms of ongoing funding to the program. And then secondly, the program receives a significant number of grants and contracts. And those grants and contracts are primarily used to support the staff of the program to complete the deliverables for the grants and contracts. But there's also a fairly significant amount of overhead that they're bringing in. A percentage of that overhead goes to the program, and a percentage of that overhead goes to the university, and that funding doesn't support the program in any way. And just an initial calculation tells us that that would be enough funding for us to think about some of the capacity needs that we would need in the agency, specifically in our business office, to support the number of positions that we would be hiring and managing, as well as the number of grants and contracts that we would bring on. And in that way, the overhead money that's coming for those projects would directly benefit the state library and the heritage program, rather than going into the university program. And I think now is a good time to be having these conversations. We have an opportunity where we see significant support from the legislature for the work of the state library. You all are familiar with the study they're going to be conducting. We've heard very positive support from them and an opportunity to think about new funding models for the programs that we offer. That support extends to the heritage program, and I think we need to think about reducing any kind of confusion that the legislature might have as we get up and talk about the fact that these programs are statutorily programs of the state library, but they're offered through the university by employees of the university. So there's an opportunity to think about the timing of this study as well. Some of the concerns that we have as we think about this opportunity, one is just our current capacity in the Central Services Office. The Heritage Program have somewhere around 23 staff. Not all of them are permanent staff. A number of them are contract staff. And then they also bring on a number of temporary staff during field seasons to help with field work. So we would need to consider the impact to our human resources. And then again, a number of grants and contracts that they bring on, somewhere between $700,000 and $900,000 worth of grants and contracts on average. So those are concerns that we would be carefully considering. As I said, we think that with the amount of overhead funds that they're bringing in, we would have the capacity to support some human resources and grants and contracts staff in the Central Services Office. And that has benefit to the rest of the agency as well, not just the Heritage Program. We all manage different kinds of grants and contracts already. Staff like Evan have a significant amount of reporting work that they have to do to administer the contracts that we're administering. There's a lot of work to prepare the budgets for those grants and contracts that a position focused on that kind of work would support. We've talked with the Commission about wanting to have more capacity to pursue more grants within the agency, and this would be a step in that direction. We all have human resources responsibilities on our plates, and having additional staff support dedicated to human resources support would then benefit all of us as well. There's a number of questions that we know we need to consider as we look at our various options. We don't want to end a relationship with the University of Montana, but I think that there are different ways that we could potentially structure that relationship. For example, you've heard Bryce talk about the Spatial Analysis Lab, which is housed at the University of Montana with staff that are helping to support GIS work on campus. And so perhaps there's an opportunity for us to scale the contract so that its primary focus is on the Spatial Analysis Lab and working with the university in that capacity. There are a number of human resource questions that we need to address, specifically what this means for employee benefits, for employees who would be state employees rather than university employees. We need to look at the hiring process to be able to move employees from the university to the state library and those kinds of considerations. As I said, we need to really clearly understand the financial implications of these decisions, looking at the overhead, for example, and being really confident that we understand the trends and funding that is available there. We need to work closely with the governor's budget office to make sure that were we to bring on their staff, that we would do so in the most strategic way and the most timely way to make sure that our next biennium budget does see the present law adjustments that we would want to see coming from this change. Of course, we need to talk about this opportunity with our partners and to get their feedback about the services they need to continue to receive from the state library and the heritage program, and any questions that they might have about changes in administration. One of the other questions that I know staff have is about the security of the program being a program of the state library. It seems sort of hidden and under the radar, being a program of the university. They're all aware of the budget cuts that the state library faced and the layoffs that we faced this last biennium. So I think that's a concern, that they would be more visible to the legislature. And I think that's I understand their concern, having just come off this biennium. My personal opinion is that that's sort of a double-sided coin. You can be under the radar and less visible to attack, but at the same time, you're also less visible then to opportunities and ownership that come with future funding. So I think that's a point for us to think about. And then the other question that we raise is we tout the fact that this relationship with the university creates more flexibility and less bureaucracy. But as we've sat down and asked ourselves what that means, we can't really answer it. It's something that we've said for many, many years, but we've never really analyzed, is it in fact more flexible, and is it less bureaucratic to have this contract or not? In some initial conversations with Bryce, where he's asked whether or not we could handle this kind of contract or that kind of grant, we know the answer is yes, because we manage similar kinds of contracts and grants here. But that's something that we want to further evaluate, especially when it comes to relationships with our partners and other state agencies. So next steps in thinking about this study, we need to meet with staff and start to hear what questions they have that we need to consider. And then between now and ideally the first of the year, and probably no later than April, we need to carefully consider the questions before us and do the most thorough analysis that we can ahead of considering any changes to that contract in the form of administration. If we decide to bring any kind of direct administration into the state library, we would probably want to do that early next fiscal year in order to plan for the state budgeting process.
Can I add one more thing? Jenny went over pretty well the big motivations for us to look into this, and I just wanted to add one more, not a motivation, but what this is not. Bryce presented a lot of the work that the Heritage Program has been doing at the last meeting. They do amazing work. Both individual and collective effort is unbelievable. This is not in any way driven by any concerns about performance or any desire to have fingers deeper into the control of how they're doing their work. We think they're doing a great job, and we don't want to disturb that. It certainly, we do see opportunities coming out of this for more work with and across different programs of the library, but we're not. It's not motivated by that in any way. The idea of closer management.
Anne, may I comment or have a couple questions?
Please.
So 3 things occur to me. I suppose the foremost is, will this result in better products or cheaper costs or different costs to the people that use these services? And if it disimproves, as you guys said, if it disimproves the quality of products coming out of there or services, or change it, makes it even more difficult for Heritage to pursue some of the sort of the bedrock stuff that they are always struggling to kind of keep up with in terms of the content and services. And I think that would be a bad thing if it caused our partners to be concerned. I think that would be a bad thing. I'd be a little bit. I'm interested in hearing what Bryce and the managers up there think about this. And then, if this turns out to be a good idea, we'll have to think very carefully about how we approach the next legislative session, both asking, I presume, for more money as part of some of the interim work that's being done, and also adding potentially 25 FTE to our count, almost doubling the size of the organization. That will make a really hard sell. So it seems to me that just in terms of our strategy for that, we need to kind of think that through very carefully.
So to respond specifically to a couple of things, better products and services, that would be the goal. Better, more direct patron support through more seamless access to different kinds of information rather than siloed information. That's what we've been striving for through the reorganizations, and that's what we'll continue to strive for. Better services, I think a really clear example is the mapping application that the Heritage Program maintains. There is significant opportunity for us to think about how we present our digital atlas, for lack of a better term, and their mapping application as a single application. There's no reason to keep those separate. And the Heritage Program has 1 programmer, and we have 2 programmers. So we need to think about how we leverage those staff, as I said, to deepen one another's benches and to continue to improve those overall products and services. To your point about our partners, this is something that we will talk specifically to them about and understand what questions they have, what services they continue to need, and how we can continue to strive to meet those service needs. And I think, too, if we have more stable, reliable funding for those core services, it can only mean continued support for those programs. Right now, so much of the work is on soft money, where there's no guarantee that we have the ability to continue to do that work. So if we have the ability to stabilize at least some of the core funding that's coming in, that too will mean that we have better ability to complete the priorities that are on the current contract statement of work.
We'll have to be able to answer the question that we're likely to get: what does counting ducks have to do with the mission of a library?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a hard question to answer.
Well, but one that we've been answering for a long time.
I understand.
Yeah.
But it will become that will be one of the questions that will get asked.
So to the question about FTE, it's unlikely that we would ask for a significant increase in House Bill 2 permanent FTE. We have right now budgeted about $400,000 for the Heritage Program contract. We're currently signing this biennium's contract, so that work will carry forward under a contract for at least this fiscal year, about $400,000 a year. So we can tie that funding to permanent FTE. And that's what the legislature wants to see. They want to see that there are existing dollars that can fund permanent FTE. So we might be asking for 3 to 5 FTE rather than 25 FTE. Because the rest of the staff of the Heritage Program are on grants and contracts, we would continue to manage them as modified FTE in the way we manage our LSTA modified FTE,
That's
FTE
a
or
good
MLI
answer.
FTE.
That's a good answer.
Unless the legislative interim committee proposes new funding, and with that new funding also proposes FTE. And so there is some opportunity there.
So the core of our argument would be greater efficiency.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. That answers this question.
I will.
I'm sorry. I have a couple of strategy questions. It seems like, from what you're saying, if I understand it, that the state library is interested in embarking on a study, and then in June or August, the state library would present either a proposal or maybe a list of different scenarios, potential scenarios, to the commission. So I would think that would be in June or August that there would be proposals or a list of suggestions or opportunities. So how, between that, how can the commission, how can the commission help? Or is there a role that you foresee the commission playing in the study?
So first and foremost, keep raising the kinds of questions that you're raising and that Bruce is raising, because these are the kinds of questions we want to be asking ourselves as we think about that. And that's exactly what we're going to tell staff when we meet with them. What questions do you have that we need to consider? I know that Bruce and sometimes Ken have attended the Heritage Partners meeting. There will be another partners meeting later this fall. Please come and listen to their questions and concerns. That will be very important. I'll make sure to bring Bryce to a future commission meeting, maybe your December commission meeting, so you can have a conversation with him about his views of the different questions that we're asking ourselves.
Generally, is he feeling copacetic with all this, or does he have concerns?
I think he's more positive than negative. He has questions. You know, I think one of the points of question for him is just the different nature of employees between the university system and the state library. What does it mean to be a permanent employee versus a modified employee versus a letter of appointment at the university? Those things are not synonymous, and so helping him understand what does it mean to have permanent funding for permanent FTE versus modified funding or soft funding for modified FTE, and reminding him that we have plenty of employees that are modified employees.
One of the concerns I've had by attending these meetings for a number of years now is every year I see either the actual dollar amount available to the program either declining in actual dollars or declining due to inflation, the value of the dollar. While at the same time I hear such praise for the incredibly fine and important work that they've been doing. And if we could reverse that trend, that would be worth a lot. The other thing that I hear at these meetings is that because of funding, they go out. The Heritage goes out after special grants and gets funded for special kind of programs, which is great. But often some of the sort of the core work that's needed to keep the program really healthy from kind of a library or information point of view sort of goes unaddressed because there isn't staff for that. They're busy doing special projects for grant things to keep people afloat. And again, if this presented an opportunity to address sort of starving of the core, if that's a fair phrase, I think that would be those would be really well worth pursuing and would, to me personally, sell me on this. I think it sounds an exciting idea.
So,
Ginny, this is Ken. It would be, I think, really useful as well to invite the university research vice president or whoever's in charge of this at the university to present at a commission meeting that I'd be interested in. I don't know all the details of if this is a negotiated indirect cost that they charge, and but I think it would be really useful to get an idea there, as well as what, in their view, what the university brings to the equation in terms of assistance, particularly with research grants and such. I think that would be useful as well.
Okay.
This fall would be a good time or a good opportunity to listen to the partners. I really enjoy that session every year, and I'm always amazed at the breadth of the federal, state, and local partners that attend that session. And they kind of go in cycles, the ones I've been to, where after a federal election, there's a lot of sort of shakeup and posturing and things, even though, so this is kind of an interim before the next election. So it's probably get a fair assessment this time than we would perhaps in a transitions type period. Assuming there is one, there may not be, but.
And I wanted to address the question that Anne raised about timing. We would bring a proposal to the commission no later than your April commission meeting. If we're ready sooner, then we would bring a recommendation sooner to give us more time for a transition period if we go down that path, but certainly no later than April. And I do see us bringing potentially a variety of different options, especially because, as I said, we want to maintain some kind of relationship to the university, where we're still able to support their research needs. And Ken, to your point, partner on research grants and that kind of thing. Jessica Mitchell, who you've met, is actually co-funded between the Heritage Program and the university to help build those bridges and maintain that relationship. So I think there will be some kind of permutation of a contract with the university regardless.
Thank you. I think April, I didn't envision you being able to accomplish all of that before June, but I mean, it sounds like you have an aggressive timeline, and April sounds even better because, to Bruce's point, we do need time to strategize for the next legislative session. I did like also Ken's suggestion to invite the vice president, who I don't remember his name, but he administers the grants or is in charge of the grants at UM. But I think that will be maybe some strategic timing on your part as to when to invite him.
Okay.
Excited.
Any other thoughts or questions? Anything you would want to see us evaluate? If you think of anything, do let us know.
Maybe I could just mention that I'm starting to think about a possible way of increasing the amount of financial support we're able to give libraries throughout the state. And I'm working on a draft that I'm going to give, with their permission, to Jenny and to you, Anne, and for conversation. It's too preliminary to be a real proposal, but maybe there would be something the commission might want to take from this thing that I'm kind of thinking about, and it might inform our process, our legislative processes next time around. Are you up for that, Anne?
Yes, thank you. Keeping in mind that we have 1 minute left, does anybody have any other business or announcements to share? Okay, hearing none, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Wow. This is exciting. This is a